So good morning, everyone, and sorry for the delay, but our chair has some difficulties and will be arriving a little bit later. So as a co-chair of the committee, vice chair, sorry, co-lead and vice chair, I'm going to take advantage of this morning session and say welcome to everyone. Thank you everyone for all this work and diligence this week. We have received input that will enable our work stream to move forward in the next phase. And because of the hard work this week, we are ahead of schedule. And therefore, we expect that the formal meeting will begin at 12:15, because we're in informal mode now, so that you are aware of that. Or at the end of, if that's earlier, of this informal meeting, whichever is later. So you're prepared for that. The Bureau has met yesterday, and we discussed how best to use this time productively while we're still in New York. And we came up as a Bureau with the idea that we would have a look at paragraph 19 of the issues note on workstream 1, where the workstream has discussed the subjects of other commitments listed in paragraph 10 of the terms of reference, but, however, was not ready to make any proposals to the plenary with respect to them. So we're basically suggesting that we take advantage of the time we have today to listen to a discussion for members, stakeholders, etc. We think it's useful to go through the questions on which the workstream discussion was based, and we want to take advantage of the time we have. Everyone is invited to give initial, high-level reactions to the questions raised. We are aware that this is not part of the agenda, so you are. This is going to be a very informal, and of course, members might need to have consultations, and we do understand that, but we do want to take use of the time. So this is not meant to be a statement of country positions, but more of a technical discussion, and taking, of course, advantage that we have other stakeholders and other members who have not taken part in the work stream itself. So the idea is to focus on the challenges rather than proposed solutions, and the solutions we look forward to at a later stage. So, without further ado, I don't know if Daniel, co-lead of Workstream 1, if you want to give us some comments, or we should just open the floor. But you're very welcome, Daniel, if you want to make any initial comments.
Okay, thank you, Chair. What we want to do is we want to go through the slides we used when we were having the workstream meetings, because we have the various questions we raised over there that we had the discussions on, and to throw those questions to each of us so that we can comment on it, very similar to what we did on Wednesday afternoon when we looked at exchange for information. And as I mentioned, it was quite a very educative discussion, because some of the things that came out were things that we hadn't even looked at or considered, even in the work stream. So we'll be very grateful that we'll put out these questions and then we attend to them. And so it covers all the other commitments in paragraph 10. So we'll start with high net worth individuals, basically, as the first slide that's over there. And the questions we asked ourselves and which we'll be grateful to get some answers to is, what are the most significant barriers each of our countries face in taxing high net worth individuals? And the questions that were raised here is it lack of progressivity in the tax code? Is it that the tax code's definition of income does not include unrealized gains? Is it lack of information about assets held or income received in one's country or received outside the jurisdiction? Is it the ability of high net worth to move assets outside the country to low or no tax jurisdiction without detection? Is it a fear of brain drain or capital flight if tax burdens are too high? Is there that there are golden visa or other programs in other countries that attract high net worth individuals, which we don't have, or immigrants? So these were the questions we asked ourselves in relation to taxing high net worth individuals. And I think we'll take them one by one. I won't go through all the styles, so each one knows. So we get some feedback on that.
Thank you, Daniel, co-lead for Workstream 1. So I open the floor as normal for, first of all, members to have, as I said, a very informal first reaction, technical discussion to tell us if they do have any reactions.
Right, thank you. And though some of us may have made some of the statements already in the work stream, we can still repeat them for the benefit of those who were not around in terms of those discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, this has been discussed in the work stream. So and the thing is, not everyone has been part of the work stream. So the idea is to sort of get everyone involved in the discussion. So even if you have made those comments in the work stream, you're very welcome to repeat them here now. So first of all, we have Nigeria. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair, for this morning. And thank you, Daniel, for posing this question. I suppose that the issue of taxation of high network individuals is not a straightforward issue. I believe that many jurisdictions have elements of differentiating tax for high network individuals, particularly if you look at the having a very progressive tax system or rate that distinguishes between the tax rate for different income stages. You will realize that high net worth persons are already in one way or the other being discriminatingly being taxed. And of course, that is what we expect from society, that the haves will help the have-nots. And then coming back to your questions, your set of, I think there are 7 bullet points there. I hope my heads are still good as they used to be. When you look at them, I think only 1 or 2 are not technical issues. The others have, maybe one or two are just things that are probably beyond what tax policy makers are able to deal with. But there's a big one that I didn't see here, and that is the issue of political consideration. You find out that in many countries, people who are super rich also have a lot of political powers. And particularly in developing countries, many of them are beyond touch or beyond the reach of the tax authorities for different reasons. And I think that issue is a key one that is missing here, and that is political power or political constitution, or whatever name you want to call it, whereby you see the super rich deemed not to be paying as much as they should be paying, and because the reach of the tax officers can't touch them because they are shielded by political powers. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigeria, and thank you for that input, particularly interesting in the sense that you added something to the questions that were already there, that we had seen. If I may, one of the things perhaps as well, which could be interesting in this context is, of course, the lack of information about assets held or income received in my own country. The way that we can work perhaps on how different countries, just as in a context of the UN, the different ways that countries actually record assets in their countries, best practices, etc. That could also be part of the discussion in this, because in the end of the day, the information is, of course, relevant here. India, please go ahead.
Chair. Of course, probably some of the points that I may mention today would have been stated in our written submissions, but nevertheless, to take this discussion forward on the matter of high net worth individuals, there are three parts of the of this issue that we look at. One is what are the problems, or what are the difficult areas when it comes to the taxation of high net worth individuals that we have come across. Now there are three or four of those. One is that, at least from an Indian experience, maybe the other country member states can share theirs, is that we have seen that this particular class of taxpayers use some very complex structures, which creates issues in the matter of proper finding the correct incidence of tax. That is one issue that we face. The other is sometimes they are able to use certain definitions of residency, whether in the tax treaties or in such documents, which can allow them to move across jurisdictions sometimes at will. The third is, the other problem that we find is the identification of beneficial ownership. That is something that many of our tax officers face in several of their tax assessments. And finally, of course, is the issue of tax competition. That is something that has to be dealt with on a separate footing, I suppose. Now, as the chair mentioned, one of the key solutions is the exchange of information. While it is true that every jurisdiction, every member state would like to come up with its own design of taxation or taxation measures for high net worth individuals, but I think what is key to a general solution is a proper exchange of information across all member states. I think this is something that was discussed yesterday. And that is why yesterday also we had mentioned that exchange of information is one of the issues that has got cross-cutting ramifications. And the taxation of high net worth individuals is one of those issues where the issue of where the tool of exchange of information is a very key thing that we can use. And in fact, then I would link it to one of the discussions we had yesterday when we were talking about the drafting of the commitment related to the fair and equitable distribution of taxes or fair allocation of taxes. I think any definition or any text that we come up with for that commitment should be carefully crafted so that even the issue of high net worth individuals can be covered in that. I think there was this discussion around the room yesterday as to whether this covers only corporate taxes or whether in the definition that was on the screen yesterday, whether high net worth individuals get covered by that formulation. So I think that is an issue that we should take into account when we draft this particular commitment and any other where we find that the issue of high net worth individuals could be of interest over there. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, India. The Secretariat want to ask a question, so go ahead, Patricia.
Thank you. Since this is a technical discussion, I'm going to take an opportunity to ask a technical question. The four issues that you raised, you started with the use of complex structures, and then your third one was the issue of beneficial ownership. So is this a question related to exchange of information, of figuring out who the real beneficial owner is in these complex structures, or is it something beyond the beneficial ownership question?
Thank you, Patricia. If India wants to reply, you're very welcome.
You're right. In fact, as of now, we have tried to tackle this issue of trying to locate beneficial ownership through exchange of information. We have been successful in some places, not very successful in some other places. We have been party to certain other discussions about having registries of beneficial ownership and all. But right now, the one thing that we have tried is the exchange of information to get to the bottom of this.
Thank you very much. I have Saudi Arabia and then Bahamas. Please go ahead, Saudi Arabia.
Thank you. I think we recognize the issues of high net worth individuals as a domestic matter, and to benefit most from such discussion, we agree with India that this work should be within sharing of best practices and exchanging of information. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bahamas, please.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I think we need to be a little bit cautious with respect to broad stroke generalities when we're talking about matters such as, for instance, beneficial ownership, matters such as, I see, Golden Visa and other programs, and these broad generalities. Countries like the Bahamas have been judged, I would say, unfairly for many years on these types of regimes. And frankly, we have invested a significant amount of capital, both human resources and money, to legitimize and to put in place beneficial ownership registries and access to beneficial ownership for countries who have concerns about taxes and the actual ownership of different structures. And so, through those efforts, this information is available, and it's available to all of your countries' tax administrations when you have a legitimate concern. So I just want to be cautious about these broad-based strokes. with respect to tax competition and the last bullet point on the slide, I think we also have to be very cautious because unless you're the United States, you tax based on residency. You don't tax based upon being a citizen of your country. And that's regardless of whether it's a low-income tax country or not. And so I think the real discussion point on that has to do with a acceptable form of what tax residency looks like. And if you study the concept of tax residency and you study it in the context of different jurisdictions, it varies by jurisdiction. And a lot of times you have to go to complex case law analysis to really determine whether somebody's tax resident in a particular country or not, and therefore you have the right to tax that person as a resident of your country. So I really think the discussion point from a technical point of view really should be around, on this item, what are the proper parameters to constitute tax residency in a particular jurisdiction? And if certainly we have situations where you might have persons who are resident in multiple jurisdictions for multiple reasons, and then what happens when you have legitimate tax residents in multiple jurisdictions, and where are the tiebreakers, where are the tax allocation rights in that context. And so I just want to be very cautious. If we're speaking about technicalities and a kind of technical opinions on these topics, that we need to really speak at a technical level and not at a broad sweeping generalities on some of these topics. And so those are some of my inputs on two of the items that have been discussed. When you talk about beneficial ownership and you talk about really the question is tax residency, not tax competition. Thank you.
Thank you, Bahamas. I have Kenya.
Greetings, Chair and distinguished members. Without running a risk of repetition, I would want to just chime in on the issue of ultimate beneficial ownership. We would like to recognize that exchange of information is key and important. However, on the practical aspect of it, when you get information, especially in relation to trusts, you realize that by the time you're trailing this information, you end up with an ultimate beneficial owner, which is defined as a class beneficiary. So you actually hit a snag at the tail end. And you're not able to continue, maybe if you're really tracking to know who the UBO is for a particular case. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kenya. I have Zambia.
Thank you, Chair. I think for Zambia, definitely lack of information is one of the barriers that we have. But I think also to a greater extent, it's we could have the information domestically, but because they're sitting in silos, that also poses a challenge because then the high net worth individuals are able to just hide information. So there's information asymmetry, just not only at a cross-border level, but also domestically as well. And on top of that, thinking, okay, obviously we are looking at exchanging information as one of the key to solving this issue. But in our case also is if, for example, we are anticipating signing the CRS in the future, and if we do have that information, but then are we going to have the capacity to actually analyze the data? And so it's also, I think, building capacity with the data analytic skills, putting that information and all the pieces of information together to ensure that we actually get the right information to collect the right amount of tax. I think that would be one of the barriers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zambia. As a general comment, I think we've talked about high-level commitments, but sometimes in order to get to an encompassing commitment, you actually need to go into a little bit more details. So I thank you for your input in that sense. It's necessary to also get into details in order to be able to actually reach that high-level commitment. Okay, so I have, before I will turn the microphone to the NGOs, I do have Brazil, so please go ahead, Brazil.
Thank you, Chair. Effective taxation of high net worth individuals is a critical tool for addressing wealth inequality. So in our view, we have especially two problems here. So one important problem is the lack of information, especially the effective beneficial owner, as it was mentioned by other delegates. The problem is compounded by the global nature of modern wealth. HNWI often hold assets in multiple countries, utilizing a web of international trust, shell companies, and offshore accounts to obscure their holdings. So this is one of the problems. And in our view, other problem is the wide difference in tax systems across different countries, because this creates a significant incentive for high net worth individuals to engage in tax avoidance strategies, such as moving their assets or even their residence. The mobility of capital and individuals make it difficult for any single country to effectively tax its wealthiest citizens without risking capital flight. So the lack of harmonizing international approach allow high net worth individuals to exploit this difference, undermining the tax base of the countries they leave behind and creating a race to the bottom in tax policy. So thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. Norway, please.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. We have spoken to this commitment earlier, both in the AHC and also in the work streams. We thought we might contribute to this discussion by sharing our experience on the taxation of high net worth individuals as a component in our tax system that is very important to contribute to reduce inequalities to the extent that you would like to use your tax system to do that. So, but of course, the design of any tax system is for the domestic preference. We have earlier also shared the view or the idea that you yourself mentioned, that a sharing of best practices and experiences in this field might be very useful. We would also, from our perspective, access to information is key here. To that extent, we share the views expressed by our Indian colleague. There are, of course, many efforts ongoing to improve access to information, also in the areas that are relevant to ensure the taxation of high net worth individuals. So I think we, in drafting this commitment, maybe we should have the discussion of whether we should focus on the domestic aspects or the aspects of international tax cooperation to ensure the taxation in line with domestic law. I would also think that this commitment, as it is expressed in the terms of reference, focuses on the tax evasion aspect more than the actual design of any tax system, and it seems to be interlinked with a number of other commitments. So we hope that we can also discuss the linkages between the commitments going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Norway. I have Colombia and then Cameroon. Please go ahead, Colombia.
Gracias, presidente. Para Colombia, la tributación efectiva de los individuos de alto patrimonio, como uno de los compromisos de la Convención Marco, es crucial, ya que somos un país con alta desigualdad en distribución de los ingresos y la riqueza, por lo cual lograr tener un sistema tributario progresivo en donde los individuos de mayores ingresos y patrimonio contribuyan en mayor medida a la financiación del Estado es fundamental para lograr mejorar el bienestar de la población y asegurar igualdad de oportunidades para todos. Así que materializar este compromiso en la Convención consideramos que sirve para asegurar una estructura de cooperación tributaria internacional que ayude a fortalecer la progresividad del sistema tributario al eliminar elementos de competencia tributaria que frecuentemente usan estos individuos de mayores ingresos para pagar menos impuestos. La materialización de este compromiso estamos conscientes que enfrenta muchas limitaciones y dificultades técnicas que ya pues han mencionado otros delegados. Estamos de acuerdo con lo mencionado por India, que estructuras complejas conllevan a que no podamos o no logremos identificar los beneficiarios finales de estas estructuras. Y aunque contamos con sistemas muy importantes de intercambio de información con otras jurisdicciones, también es cierto que la dificultad se da cuando las estructuras son tan complejas y llevan a que ni siquiera por medio de un intercambio de información se logre identificar el beneficiario final. Igualmente consideramos que somos el riesgo que pueda existir de que los individuos se desplacen a otras jurisdicciones buscando cambiar su residencia fiscal también es un reto, y esto se da por las diferencias en tasas de tributación que conlleva que estos individuos pues, puedan localizarse en sitios donde claramente su tributación va a ser menor, y allí pues viene de ahí la importancia que se da en la definición, como también lo mencionaban otros delegados, de la definición y la claridad en el establecimiento de la residencia fiscal de los individuos. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, Colombia. Cameroon, please, go ahead.
Merci, Madame la Présidente, de nous passer la parole sur cette question importante relative à l'imposition des personnes fortunées. De notre perspective, de notre point de vue, la principale barrière, le principal obstacle à l'imposition des personnes fortunées reste l'accès à l'information, en particulier l'information sur les revenus qui sont générés à l'étranger ou les actifs qui sont détenus à l'étranger. Parce que dans les juridictions qui appliquent le principe de la mondialité, du point de vue de l'imposition des revenus des personnes physiques, où l'obligation fiscale est illimitée, c'est-à-dire on doit payer l'impôt non seulement sur les revenus qui sont générés sur le territoire de résidence, mais également sur les revenus qui sont générés à l'étranger. Il faut accéder à l'information sur ces revenus-là qui sont générés à l'étranger. Sinon, on ne peut pas, en tant qu'administration fiscale, être efficace et percevoir le juste impôt sur ces personnes-là. Maintenant, en termes de solutions, je pense que la solution reste la coopération internationale entre les États, entre les juridictions, qu'il faut absolument renforcer. Ça ne doit pas être quelque chose d'optionnel. Tous les États doivent s'engager à participer à ce mouvement de coopération internationale-là. Les outils existent déjà, c'est l'échange de renseignements, que ce soit l'échange sur demande ou l'échange automatique de renseignements. C'est aussi d'avoir dans toutes les juridictions des législations sur les bénéficiaires effectifs. Il faut les identifier, les bénéficiaires effectifs, mais surtout aussi partager les informations sur les bénéficiaires effectifs en intégrant les registres des bénéficiaires effectifs pour que tout le monde puisse accéder en temps réel à l'information nécessaire pour imposer ces personnes fortunées. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Cameroon. I have no other member states asking for the floor. So we would go over to stakeholders, and I have NGO 1, which is the Center for Economic and Social Rights. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I speak on behalf of the Center for Economic and Social Rights and other civil society organizations present here. On high net worth individuals, we would like to raise 3 related challenges. First, and on the scope of the commitment, we know that while the issue now refers to tax evasion and avoidance by high net worth individuals, the TORs also include a commitment to ensuring their effective taxation. And using the full TOR's wording going forward is essential in our view, given that increasingly and in terms of challenges, research shows that high net worth individuals often benefit from far lower tax rates than other groups, resulting in ineffectiveness and lack of progressivity. It is also vital that when other relevant provisions in the convention are drafted, they are sufficiently broad to encompass both individuals and corporations, as discussed earlier. We further believe that while the commitment can be written in broad and crisp terms, its text can be sufficiently actionable and self-executing for a future COP or related mechanism to advance in analysis, data production, and standard setting. And commitments assumed by some member states in the Compromiso de Sevilla and the G20 provide guiding examples of measures that a COP could take, such as exchanging best practices or devising anti-avoidance mechanisms to address the challenges being discussed right now. Second, we see a challenge on the allocation of taxing rights. In connection with this commitment, we believe that allocation of taxing rights and the commitment overall should pursue the overall objective of reducing inequalities within and between countries being discussed now. And this is key to addressing broader challenges such as the climate crisis and the need for funding for sustainable development and human rights. And for this purpose, we believe the committee could, for example, explore definitions of high net worth individuals that are absolute or relative to better reflect the specific circumstances of both developed and developing countries, and consider the location of assets, the residence of taxpayers, and new tailored rules to ensure that all countries are able to mobilize resources from high net worth individuals. And lastly, and in line with what is being discussed, we'd like to stress the instrumentality of tax transparency for the actual delivery of this commitment, as the last challenge is that no country can tackle this problem alone. So effective taxation of high net worth individuals will require global coordination to stall the race to the bottom and enhance existing mechanisms to ensure that exchange of information covers more assets toward the creation of a global asset registry, to increase public beneficial ownership information, and to address other obstacles that countries have faced when trying to tax high net worth individuals in the past weren't relevant. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I have NGO 11, which is the Greenpeace International. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. We welcome the opportunity to discuss the commitment on addressing tax evasion and avoidance by high net worth individuals. Similar to the previous speaker, we strongly recommend that the commitment on this matter include the full wording from paragraph 10b from the terms of reference. This paragraph refers not only to addressing tax evasion and avoidance by high net worth individuals, but also to ensuring their effective taxation. Ensuring the effective taxation of high net worth individuals plays a critical role in closing the significant financing gap for the Sustainable Development Goals and other international agreements, as recognized in paragraphs 2 and 10c of the TOR. We would also like to recall that the issues note, paragraph 18, invites the committee to consider whether there are additional aspects of international tax cooperation that contribute to sustainable development, which should be addressed in further paragraphs of the Framework Convention. We recommend that the commitment on high net worth individuals be further elaborated to include a clear mandate for the effective and progressive taxation of high net worth individuals, not only in relevant jurisdictions, but also through a coordinated global effort, including specific global mechanisms to unlock wealth transparency and combat illicit financial flows. Such a mandate should reflect the principles of equity and transparency and is especially necessary in the case of individuals with cross-border income and wealth. As reflected in the F54 outcome document, progressive taxation of high net worth individuals is vital to tackling inequalities and mobilizing resources for sustainable development. We recommend that the commitment related to the taxation of high net worth individuals include language on the reduction of disparities within and between countries and the contribution it can make to both social and environmental priorities, including addressing ecological debt. Achieving a fairer allocation of taxing rights between countries is another foundational piece of the puzzle to deliver effective global mechanisms concerning the taxation of high net worth individuals. Finally, as outlined in the Convention's term of reference under paragraph 13, we encourage the Committee to begin discussing the relationship of this commitment and associated mechanisms to other international agreements. In this context, we also support the option of channeling revenues from high net worth individual taxation into existing UN multilateral funds for climate action and sustainable development. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. In particular, I think the interaction between different commitments that you've sort of pointed out was very helpful. Thank you very much. Ataf, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Ataf have identified two broad barriers, significant barriers to taxation of high net worth individuals. One set lies within the context of a domestic framework, and like Nigeria and a few other countries have highlighted, that will include the political will to apply the existing laws and measures to hold these individuals, some of who are politically exposed, accountable by the laws of the land. This lies within our powers as sovereigns, and anytime we are ready, we could take those measures with or without multilateral or even bilateral help. But of more importance to us, Chair, is the aspect that have to do with transnational or individuals who have wealth and are able to move it across different jurisdictions. In this context, a major barrier is access to information, and that has been highlighted by Cameroon and a few other countries. And you look at the existing instrument like Common Reporting Standard, it could be very helpful in holding this individual to account, but then there's barrier to entry. The high cost of implementing those standards and the conditionality that attends its implementation means that it is hardly afforded by our members. So that is a very critical barrier. Another element is when you are even able to have access to the information and you see this asset where they are stashed out in foreign jurisdiction, how are you able to recover it? Is there willingness on the side of the other jurisdictions to help you repatriate this asset? So this element is where we think the committee should focus on, the ones that need corporations at a multilateral level to ensure that not only do countries have access to relevant information of their residents in different countries, but also when they have such access, they are able to follow up and repatriate the asset where need be. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ataf, and thank you in particular for adding to the complexities that we've identified already, and that's very helpful for the discussion to go for the future. I have now Honduras. Please go ahead, por favor.
Muchas gracias por la palabra, Presidenta. Quiero secundar el aporte de Nigeria y del colega de la TAF respecto a que los grandes patrimonios usualmente tienen mucho poder político y generalmente están coludidos. Ese es el caso de Honduras, que en este momento nos encontramos con dificultades para cambiar ese status quo. Existen propuestas de leyes que han sido impulsadas desde el gobierno y otros sectores interesados, pero esas fuerzas económicas con las que hay que enfrentarse dificultan su aprobación. Tenemos renta territorial que no nos permite gravar ingresos generados en el exterior. Aún existe la figura de acciones al portador y el beneficiario final solo se identifica para fines de lavado de activos y no para fines fiscales. Todo esto hace que sea muy difícil determinar la base impositiva de los altos patrimonios. Sabemos que esto no afecta solo a nivel local, sino que también colabora a la evasión internacional. Por lo que Honduras quiere expresar que ese tema es de mucha importancia para nosotros y consideramos que esta convención debe establecer normas claras y herramientas eficaces para gravar estos capitales, incluyendo el intercambio efectivo de información y hacer un registro público global de beneficiarios finales. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Honduras. I now have NGO 2, which is the Major Group for Children and Youth. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Vaishnavi, and I'm speaking on behalf of the FFD Children and Youth constituency from the Major Group for Children and Youth. As we continue to shape a fairer global tax system, it is essential to view these commitments through the lens of sustainable development and intergenerational justice. The challenges outlined, tax evasion and avoidance by high net worth individuals, illicit financial flows, harmful tax practices, and the lack of mutual administrative assistance, do not exist in isolation. They directly undermine the capacity of developing countries to invest in the very systems that uphold the pillars of sustainable development: health, education, climate resiliency, social protection, peace, and security. The absence of transparency around income and assets held abroad deprives nations, particularly in the global south, of the resources they need to deliver on these commitments to sustainability, climate justice, and poverty eradication. We as young people are inheriting a world burdened by inequality, ecological collapse, and shrinking fiscal space. Yet, we are told to innovate, to lead, to build sustainable futures. To establish sustainable economy and for development programs to improve, it is essential to enhance public-private partnerships. It is essential for multi-billion-dollar companies to work with the public sector to enhance funding for programs that support development. This can improve education and health sector worldwide, benefiting future generations. The money produced by private sector should not only benefit the private sector, but also be invested in the public sector. In every multi-stakeholder meetings, the private sector should be present. This is an effective way to bridge the gap between the public sector, the private sector, and civil society. Every dollar lost to tax abuse is dollars stolen from classrooms, hospitals, clean water, access to food, and green infrastructure. We must address this issue to ensure the security of future generations. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I have the African Union. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Excellencies, and distinguished delegates. The African Union would like to align its perspective with Nigeria, Kenya, Zambia, Cameroon, ATAF, and others, and also would like to extend appreciation to the colleagues for the excellent presentation. Taxing high net worth individuals fairly and effectively is central to mobilizing domestic resources, reducing inequality, and achieving Agenda 2063 and the Sustainable Development Goals. But yet, across our member states, several persistent barriers are impeding this process. First of all, we have aggressive cross-border tax avoidance and evasion schemes, with many high net worth individuals using these complex offshore structures to evade taxes. Secondly, we have the limited capacity and specialized expertise in the tax administrations. In many of our countries, tax authorities lack the forensic audit skills, advanced data analytics tools, and interagency cooperation needed to investigate and prosecute sophisticated high net worth individual tax cases. Thirdly, we have the weak enforcement of assets and wealth disclosure requirements. Even where beneficial ownership register exists, inadequate verifications, loopholes, and poor interconnections with international database undermine their effectiveness. Fourthly, political economy constraints are also influencing some high net worth individuals that can weaken enforcements. To address these challenges, the African Union proposes that the Framework Convention, first of all, embed the commitment to comprehensive information exchange covering beneficial ownership, cross-border financial accounts, and asset registries supported by capacity building for tax administrations. Secondly, it is important to strengthen global cooperation against illicit financial flows, ensuring that high net worth individuals cannot avoid legal loopholes or opaque jurisdictions. Thirdly, it is important to facilitate peer learning and exchange of best practices among member states, drawing on successful enforcement models and innovations. And lastly, safeguarding policy spaces for developing countries to design high net worth individual taxation frameworks can also be instrumental. Chair, taxing high net worth individuals effectively, as we said, is not about penalizing success. It is about ensuring that those with the greatest capacity contribute their fair share to the society from which they benefit. By addressing these barriers in the Framework Convention and its protocol, we can enhance equity, protect sovereignty, and mobilize the resources that developing economies are looking forward to finance their development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, African Union. I have NGO 12, which is Human Rights Watch. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. I speak on behalf of the Tax Justice Network and the Justicia. Transparency is the beacon that exposes the shadows of tax abuse. It is the kryptonite of tax abusers and its enablers. And it is also one of the most powerful tools to ensure this convention yields gains for all states from day one. Transparency is already in Principle 9E in the terms of reference. However, for the Convention to achieve its objectives and for the other commitments in paragraph 10 of the TORs to be effective, transparency must be also an actionable standalone commitment from the outset. The creation of global public registries of key information, such as country-by-country reports and key information about ownership of legal vehicles through a global registry, points firmly established in the Compromiso de Sevilla, paragraph 28, must be included as part of such a commitment on transparency. The Framework Convention is the vehicle to deliver on these actions. Principle 9I on transparency demands the highest standard as a global norm, public access. The reasons for deviating from the public access standards should be clearly defined as an exception, as demanded by the right to access to information. Where domestic protections require safeguarding certain information, the Convention must establish the obligations of the states not to deny information that is critical for other states to combat cross-border tax abuses by both corporations and individuals. If there is info that needs to be protected on confidentiality and privacy grounds, this must be made compatible with pathways that allow authorities from all countries to access the information required to fulfill the various commitments of the Convention. For information that continues to be exchanged between authorities, a universal standard for automatic information exchange is needed, as some states have already suggested in their submissions. Currently, there is no globally agreed upon framework designed from the outset to prioritize equitable access to tax information exchange for all willing countries, tailored to their specific needs and capacities. Existing frameworks such as the OECD's Common Reporting Standard and the Crypto Asset Reporting Framework are often structured to favor wealthier nations with advanced tax administrations. These standards impose technical administrative requirements that many lower-income countries cannot meet without significant support, effectively excluding them from meaningful participation. Under a standard and system of governance created by the Framework Convention with differentiated responsibilities, all willing countries should be able to benefit from access to key information before facing any immediate requirement to reciprocate. A subsidiary body created by the Convention should manage global registries, analyze data, and provide quantitative evaluations. Madam Chair, transparency is a cornerstone of effective tax cooperation. We endorse the inclusion of a standalone actionable commitment on transparency. If these measures are not adopted as a separate commitment, they should be operationalized through cross-cutting mechanisms to operationalize other commitments. Esteemed delegates, the more ambitious we are on transparency, the larger the losses for tax abusers and their enablers, and the larger the gains for all states here, with no exceptions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those words. I have stakeholder 10, which is Bombay Chartered Accountants Society. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Very interesting comments are made by all the previous speakers, and I do not necessarily disagree with them. I do agree with them, but I have a different perspective. I just want to add a different perspective. Possessing a high net worth doesn't become a crime. But if a guy indulges into tax evasion, that's a crime. So that's something which we should be very careful. Instead of portraying someone with a high net worth as a villain. Yes, progressive taxation is important, But at the same time, it should also be noted that if I take away all the capital which HNI has, in the form of, let's say, 20% wealth tax year on year, then he doesn't have capital to invest. The HNIs essentially invest, they create jobs, they create wealth for the society, something which not necessarily the governments, would be able to do by collecting taxes. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Côte d'Ivoire, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Nous voudons nous associer à la position de l'Union africaine, du groupe Afrique, du Cameroun et de bien d'autres pays. Nous voulons faire quelques observations à titre national. Alors, en Côte d'Ivoire, l'imposition des particuliers fortunés se heurte à plusieurs obstacles majeurs. Il y a d'abord le fait que ces contribuables disposent souvent de moyens sophistiqués pour optimiser et échapper à l'impôt, notamment à travers des montages juridiques, hybrides et l'usage de paradis fiscaux. Ensuite, il y a le grand problème de la concurrence fiscale entre les pays, qui rend difficile, en ce qui concerne la Côte d'Ivoire, en tout cas, et je pense que c'est la situation dans bien d'autres pays en développement. Donc la concurrence fiscale rend difficile l'imposition de taux élevés de taxation de la fortune de ces particuliers par crainte de fuite de capitaux, de relocalisation des actifs hors du territoire national. Nous faisons face également à la question des résistances politiques et sociales qui sont aussi très fortes et qui sont alimentées par l'influence des élites économiques sur les décisions publiques. Il faut rappeler que dans notre pays, en général, les particuliers fortunés sont des personnes politiques ou qui ont une forte influence sur les positions politiques. De plus, l'évaluation précise du patrimoine de ces individus, notamment lorsqu'il s'agit d'actifs non cotés, reste complexe. Enfin, l'un des obstacles importants, c'est l'absence de coordination internationale efficace qui fragilise nos dispositifs fiscaux. Il y a également des arguments idéologiques qui opposent parfois la fiscalité sur la fortune et la liberté d'entreprendre. Un intervenant précédent a indiqué que les particuliers fortunés ne sont pas forcément des fraudeurs. En somme, notre pays fait face à divers défis, notamment techniques, politiques et économiques, qui freinent la fiscalité équitable applicable à ces personnes, malgré le fait qu'il existe un large consensus sur la nécessité de réduire les inégalités. Madame la Présidente, à notre avis, la Convention cadre devrait pouvoir adresser ces problèmes et donner à tous les pays, notamment aux pays en développement, des orientations, des cadres, des principes, afin de percevoir un impôt juste sur les revenus et les avoirs de ces personnes. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup, Côte d'Ivoire. I thank you all for your input into this discussion. I do not have anyone else asking for the floor. I think I'm very pleased that we've been able to have this technical discussion because we were early and we have finished our other work that we should have we have to do. So very happy to have had this informal discussion that get everyone up to, hang on, to a little bit of what has been the discussion going on in the work stream, so that everyone has been able now to listen to that discussion, Daniel, and being up to informed on how the discussion is taking place. And also in particular then, of course, member states who have not been able to take part in the work stream, but also stakeholders that have been able to give them their views today. Now, one of the things that I actually had talked to and thought about, and listening to what you've said today, is about information, of course, and the global assets registries. So I actually had a word with our secretariat, and Patricia has been so kind to give us some views on that we could share. Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, questions, not views. But one of the things, well, maybe close to a view. We've heard the need for global asset registries, and I believe that is a very useful tool. But what we heard, starting with India and repeated by multiple member states, is the difficulty of figuring out who the ultimate beneficial owner is, particularly through these complex structures. And we heard specifically about the problem of trusts and class beneficiaries, where it can be very difficult to figure out the ultimate beneficial ownership. And so there is the series of practical problems, which can be overcome, but it does require, I think, a lot of technical analysis. There is also, and this is the specific thing that the chair and I were talking about earlier, Madam Chair, earlier, is that the information, before you have a global asset registry, you sort of need to have a national asset registry, or at least a way of getting the information to the global asset registry. And I've talked to various member states about where the information resides within their countries. And so a lot of it, real property, for example, is frequently not held at the national level. In my country, for example, it is at the county level, not even at the state level. And I've talked to some other countries. Madam Chair comes from a country that is much more progressive, and they have a national land registry. But I think it is, in order, the technical work, the practical work to get to a global asset registry requires first a mapping of where that information resides in different countries. And so that is, I don't think it's necessarily conceptually difficult. It's just tedious to determine all that. But I think that work needs to be done in order to move to the goal of having a global asset registry. So I'd be interested. Maybe it's not a problem for other countries. Maybe most of them are, enlightened, like Chile, and have that information in an easily accessible way. But I think we need to determine that.
Chair, please. The real chair.
Okay, just one comment on what Patricia was just saying, that you were asking about where the assets reside inside the country, in which level. But actually, I can tell you, in some countries, it doesn't reside at all anywhere in the country. So they don't have at all. So even inside the country, if they try to trace one of the property or one of the assets and see who is the true beneficiary of these assets, they don't have this information. So I think there should be, if we are looking at a global registry that should exist, there should be sort of, I don't know how to say it, but enforcement on the national level that the real beneficial owner should exist. They should have this for their own national revenues, and in addition to be after that provided to the global register. And as far as I know, that there is many developing countries really suffer from these issues, that they don't have any traceability to the true beneficial owner in their national level. So I think that that's what we need to look at also, how this can be enforced for the sake of international cooperation, to be enforced on the national level. And this is practice that we saw in different tax practices through the history, that sometimes there is some laws or some rules are enforced on national level in order to enhance the international practice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I got some reaction from Bahamas there. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Just to react to the query that was put by the Secretariat. We're talking about, there's a lot of dialogue about a beneficial ownership registry and exchange of beneficial ownership, and now we've leaped into an asset registry, which is frankly completely different than a beneficial ownership registry. And in practical terms, with the mobility of capital and the frequency of disposition of assets by persons throughout the world, is probably an impossible thing to actually do. I think if we look at a standardized approach to, in the first instance, to a beneficial ownership registry, where we're talking about a standard form for entities and legal arrangements such as trusts, and really who's the beneficial ownership of a trust, that depends on how the trust is structured, frankly. I think that would be a good first step. And internationally, we've seen this as a clear double standard in international regulatory practice, where countries like the Bahamas, who are deemed low-tax jurisdictions, are mandated to have beneficial ownership registries by the OECD, where likewise most countries, if not all countries, under FATF standards are mandated to have some form of beneficial ownership information, whether that be at the regulated entity level, such as the trustee in the terms of trusts, or the registered agent in terms of companies, or at a registry level. And so I think that many of the countries who aren't mandated and who don't have a registry in force can, and if that's something they support, they can look at really the historical double standard that countries like the Bahamas have had to live under in having to develop very mature beneficial ownership registries in our jurisdictions as a template, if that is what the consensus is in the room. I think a lot of the issues being discussed is that for many years, the vast majority of countries in the room have not had to maintain, to the chair's point, domestically this type of beneficial ownership information compiled in a single source. And I think that is part of the trepidation that we're hearing in the room. And if all countries had to live under the same standard, frankly, the standard that we've had to live under for a number of years, then I think people would feel more comfortable with access to beneficial ownership information. But in reaction to the registry of assets, I think that is a completely different thing than a registry of beneficial ownership information. Thank you.
Thank you, Bahamas. And to your point, I absolutely agree. It's a completely different thing. And I think we are here in a sort of scoping and understanding mode. And one of the things that we've heard here is that you need to get information. And information is only available if you have registers and the different ways of register global assets, property, real property in your country. I would hesitate to use the word best practice, but I think this group could at least look at practices of registering and see what that is, if that's helpful to membership. Because at least as Secretariat has pointed out, in my country, we do actually tax real property. And that's why we have so good register, because we need to know who they are, who has property. So, but that is, you know, these are things that are different and different policies in different countries. So the point here, what we're trying to do is a sort of scoping exercise, exchanging technical issues, and then try to raise that to a high-level commitment, if that is possible. So. Thank you for that very helpful discussion. I think we had a very good exchange, and I think we have benefited from hearing inputs that has been discussed in the work stream, but then it has become more public with these informal discussions that we've heard today. So, and I just had a quick word with Daniel. There is other commitments if we have time. We have 20 minutes left. So please, Daniel, if you would like to present a next issues to be discussed.
Okay, you can go to the next 2 slides. No, next slide. Next one. Next one. Yep, okay. So we started looking at effective mutual administrative assistance on Wednesday when we looked at exchange of information. There is another leg of it which we would like some feedback on, and it relates to assistance in collection. But then there are 2 more questions would add to it. So the first one is, what is our country experiences with assistance in collection, if any? And then, what could the Framework Convention do to expand on existing international exchange and collection assistance mechanisms? And are there any other forms of mutual administrative assistance that we would like to see addressed in the Framework Convention? Since the Convention mentioned mainly transparency and exchange of information and then the collection. So please, if we have anything on those, if we could advance it.
Thank you, Daniel. So I open the floor for, first of all, membership, if there's any input you would like to share for those questions. These are questions that have been discussed in the work stream, but we now open it up for Ghana. Please go ahead.
All right. Madam Chair, thank you very much. And I think that on the issue as on the board, assistance in collection with experience, as a country, we have a basic challenge with respect to taxes that has to be collected across the borders. Basically, based on the fact that most of our tax treaties do not have, that is, bilateral tax treaties do not have the article on assistance in collection. And also going under the existing mark, we realize that many countries have entered a reservation not to do assistance in collection. And so in as much as you are able to identify that a taxpayer resides in a country where either you have a tax treaty or you have a multilateral agreement, you are unable to collect due to this basic challenge that I have enumerated. What can be done? I think that at a high level, countries can be committed to, or countries can have the commitment to not to have reservations when it comes to assistance in collection of tax or revenue claims, and also to ensure that we don't have any limitations, so that any country or other countries who do not have either bilateral tax treaties or they are not signed on to the multilateral conventions can have remedy under the Framework Convention to enforce their tax matters outside the jurisdiction. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ghana. I don't have any other hands up. I can share my own experience when I raised this with my commissioner, and he said we have enough problems of collecting in our own country. But let's not be so negative about this. I got Zambia, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I was laughing when you just made that statement because those are some of the issues we are also debating with Zambia as we prepare to sign an agreement that will allow for the assistance in collection of taxes. But we do have the article in our bilateral treaties, and obviously we have our own domestic debt that we're trying to sort out. And so the question is, do we have the capacity to start assisting other states in collecting the debt as well at an international level? And from our experience so far, I think it hasn't been easy, but because we have obviously committed in the bilateral treaties to do it, it's something that requires capacity. And I don't know if that's something that, as we look at the convention, we could see how best we could help developing countries when it comes to building capacity, when it comes to collecting debt or cross-border debt, because domestically we're already struggling. So yeah, I just thought I should mention from the Zambian experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zambia. I got Nigeria. Please go ahead, Nigeria.
Thanks, Chair. I think the issue of assistance in tax collection may not be as complex as it looks. If I take, for example, in Africa, we have the African Mutual Agreement, which includes provisions for joint audit, provisions for assistance in tax collection. I suppose we also have in the EU OECD multilateral agreement for those of us who are signed up to it. I think the challenge that I have, I think, is that most countries do not have domestic laws enabling them to do that. For example, in Nigeria, we do not have any provision in our domestic law that enables us to collect tax for other jurisdictions. But in the new reform that we are starting from next January, we have put in our law the ability of the tax authority to assist other jurisdictions in collecting taxes. And actually, I don't think it's a matter of we are not collecting enough for our jurisdiction, because you are not using anything extra other than your domestic law to do so. And so even though we do not have an experience yet, we believe from next year we should be in a position to assist willing partners under our domestic law to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nigeria. Yeah, and I think that is exactly a point that has in my country. Lesotho, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And maybe for us as a starting point, I must indicate that in the recent treaties that we negotiate, if we are not going to have a assistance in collection article, then we are not going to have a treaty. The view or our standpoint is that if you are able to come and do joint audits with us and provide the information, like the colleague from Nigeria is saying, collection is not as difficult as actually building up the debt. So if you don't have that article, or we are not going to have that article as a policy measure, we are not going to conclude a treaty with that. And I think one big challenge that we are facing is that we perhaps need to develop capacity to be able to conserve or safeguard the debt, because by the time we are talking as tax officials, the taxpayer is already looking at ways of making sure that whatever has to be recovered disappears. So if we could, because it's a requirement under that particular article that you should be able to conserve the debt as a requested state. So if we could have capacity and look at ways as to how we can make sure that we are at least up to scratch on that, then I think more countries will be willing to assist in that regard. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Lesotho. I have Jamaica and then India. Please go ahead, Jamaica.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering for those jurisdictions here who might have assistance with tax collection and have, in fact, implemented it in their jurisdictions. I was just curious as to who bears the cost in those situations, because there's always a cost for collection.
Thank you, Jamaica, for that question. And if I may add, I think one of the problems, or one of the issues, is that developing countries has less experience of this particular mutual assistance between countries. However, I do think there exists quite a lot of experience between developed countries. And in fact, I had the possibility of chairing a panel on mutual assistance. And I was really impressed by exchanges of mutual assistance between developed countries and how they have gone about this. So it would be very interesting for this group to hear about that experience, I think. So I invite those of you who have more experience of that to share that either now or in future in this work stream. So thank you for the question, and I'm sure we will get some answers, Jamaica. India and then Kenya.
Thank you, Chair. In fact, most of what I wished to say had already been said by speakers earlier, but I was very impressed by the distinguished delegate from Lesotho who said that they wouldn't have a treaty if this article was not there. We just want to tell them that we are willing to have the article. So, but that apart, we've also, like some of the speakers went earlier, we've been also including this trying to include this article in the treaties that we are renegotiating. India has already an extensive treaty network, so whenever a treaty renegotiation comes up, or when we have a new treaty, we do try to get this exchange of assistance in collection article. There is hesitation in some jurisdictions. Some other jurisdictions are not hesitant. Of course, the way we have done it so far is that while the article is there in the treaty, we sign a separate MOU to kind of operationalize it. That gives us the advantage of being able to iron out certain issues, like the one that was raised by the distinguished delegate from Jamaica, as to costs, as to how would we deal with when there are foreign exchange translation issues. So that formulation where there is then MOU that follows the article itself, that has always been more helpful. We have signed an assistance and collection MOU with another treaty partner, and that is going very well. So our experience in this has been slow in taking off, but this is something that we are pursuing, and I must say that there is more and more acceptance among our treaty partners to this position. Thank you.
Thank you very much, India, Kenya, and then I have Estonia. So please go ahead, Kenya.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the other colleagues that have shared their experience in this area. We see assistance in collection in particular as an area that needs international cooperation. And I just wanted to support the comments that were made by my colleague from Ghana on their experience with this. We are part of a multilateral framework that should be able to address or assist in the implementation of this form of mutual administrative assistance. But we do face challenges in that area because, as he said, a lot of our partners have placed reservations against this. And that's why one of our initial comments, I think on day one, was that yes, there might be existing frameworks, but those frameworks have not been effective in terms of implementing this. And in this area, the reservations that we usually meet on the other side of assistance in collection, they have stopped the effectiveness of that particular framework. So how we see this being addressed at the UN is to have more willingness in implementing mutual administrative assistance, so that we don't have an instrument that should be able to meet this objective, but then it allows countries to place reservations that stop the assistance in collection from actually being implemented. So we would want to see more willingness in terms of this. I agree with you that we are met a lot with comments that we have struggles collecting our own tax. How should we assist other countries to collect their own? But I think having the willingness to assist and then analyzing requests as and when they come, I think that would definitely help the process, and international tax cooperation would really help in this area. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Estonia, please, go ahead.
Thank you. I thought I would pick up on your call to say something positive about administrative assistance. And I have to admit that in the European Union, it works pretty well, and we don't only assist each other in the field of direct taxes, but also excises, VAT, and customs duties. Since I work for the Ministry of Finance, I don't have direct experience in this field, because we only hear about the cases that have somehow gone wrong. And then the taxpayers turn to us as a last resort, hoping to get some assistance. What we have learned from our experience is that it definitely works better between the neighboring countries or the countries that are not too far from each other. And for the assistance in collection to be really effective, it helps a lot if there is also a good personal level connection between the tax administration, so to say that they get along well. And perhaps the most important thing is that there has to be trust between the countries and the tax administrations. And yeah, I mean, it does work. In the tax treaties, we always suggest it, but if the other country says that for some reason they might not be able to assist us, or we don't see much willingness, then we never press for it, because then we are concerned that perhaps we will be in a rather unequal situation there, where we could be collecting the taxes for other countries, but not the other way around. And also the countries that are very far apart and where the individuals don't move that much, and there isn't too much economic activity at a particular point in time. Maybe it isn't that relevant, but often we also have this discussion in the treaty negotiations that let's keep our options open and see that maybe in 5 to 10 years we may return to this issue. So if it works, it's a great instrument. We can recommend.
Thank you very much to Estonia for sharing that positive note, and also, of course, important to share the experience with other countries who do not have that experience. I don't have any other hands up. I don't know, Daniel, if you want to have some clue. European Union, please, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Distinguished delegates, excellencies. This is a point that is not strictly related to the question that is on the screen, but is it connected in a way with exchange of information? An exchange of information is widely acknowledged as a key instrument for tax collection, and including for mutual administrative assistance. There is one issue that I would like to highlight, which is critical for EU member states, and is personal data protection. You, as a tax expert, those who are familiar with tax issues and exchange of information for tax purposes, for sure know the concept of confidentiality conditions and safeguards, which are important for performing exchange of information. But there is also an additional perspective to be considered, which is indeed personal data protection. For the European Union, the exchange of tax information between member states and third countries must navigate the delicate balance between the need for tax transparency and the right to personal data protection. And we have within the EU a specific legal instrument, which is the General Data Protection Regulation, which establishes the strict rules for processing personal data, which emphasize the need for lawful, transparent, purpose limitation, data minimization, accuracy, storage limitation, integrity, amongst the other principles, when treating personal data. Tax authorities that are used to engage in information exchange must adhere to this principle, ensuring that data is collected, processed, and exchanged lawfully and only for legitimate purposes. These conditions are also embedded in the European directive dealing with administrative cooperation in the field of direct taxation. My main message is to say that tax information is essential for combating tax evasion and ensuring a fair tax system, but it must be conducted in a manner that upholds the fundamental rights to data protection, as enshrined, as I said, in the General Data Protection Regulation and other relevant EU legislation. I think that it's the purpose of this international negotiating committee to look at this issue as well when drafting the legal texts, because this is an important element in addition to confidentiality, safeguards and conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that input into this issue. And I got Germany.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. My intervention builds on the previous intervention of the distinguished delegate from Estonia. I would like to pick that up. And so speaking about the collection of taxes, that sounds a little bit like benign, but in fact, the truth is it is enforcement. It is kind of almost the harshest kind of enforcement imaginable from the perspective, at least, of a taxpayer. And the truth is it is very intrusive in the civil rights of the taxpayers, and that requires trust. So, and it is true what was said previously. It is the trust between the administrations involved, and a personal relationship is good. But what is fundamental prerequisite is the institutional trust into the judicial system of the other country, jurisdiction, that the enforceable decisions came to be reflective of the rule of law. And that is something that can't be ignored and has to be kind of the fundamental basis for all considerations to that end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Germany. Now I do not have any more hands. I will just ask you for a couple of minutes to confer with the real chair. But I think we are sort of finishing, so... I'm being asked if there was any input from stakeholders. I didn't get any hands up, but you are very welcome to put your hand up now. Thank you very much. So thank you very much. And do you want me to close the meeting? Yeah? You close the meeting? Okay. Sorry? We have to. Sort of. Yeah. We have to close the meeting. These are all technical issues that the real chair knows much better than me, but I'll do it anyway. So it's the second plenary meeting of the, sorry. It's better you do it. I close the informal meeting. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. First, I would like to apologize for arriving late this morning and starting actually late. It was because of me, but it was out of my hand. So my apologies for this. But I saw that Lisa was doing much better than me, which is a good thing. So Lisa, we want you to chair the next week whole. Now we need to convert to the formal mood in order to close the first session. As everyone knows that these 2 weeks are split into 2 sessions, first session and second session. So now I think we are done with the first session. So we're going to close formally this session. And next week on Monday, we're going to open the second session for this committee in 2025. Then we have the third session that will be in Nairobi. And then by this, we already to have 3 sessions within the year as per the resolution. So now we are converting to a formal mood for this meeting. So the second plenary meeting of the committee is called to order. I declare closed the first session of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee on the United Nations Framework Convention on International Tax Cooperation. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. Just to make sure we don't have any afternoon sessions today. So now the second session is adjourned, and looking forward to see you all on Monday in the same room at 10 a.m. morning. Thank you.